All right, you are welcome from that quick timeout. Now, straight to our discussion segment, where we will be talking about the National Youth Conference and analysis on emerging issues in the polity. Now, as the nation grapples with pressing political and socio-economic challenges, the National Youth Conference, provides a crucial platform to address emerging issues shaping the polity. From electoral reforms to governance, transparency, youth empowerment, and national unity, the gathering aims to foster critical discussions and strategic solutions. Amidst the debate and resolutions of the Confab, young leaders will harness their voices and ideas to drive transformational change for a more inclusive and progressive society. Now, joining us to talk about the emerging issues and tell us more on the National Youth Conference, what to expect, the angle is taken, the selection, basically every question we've all had regarding it. We have joining us via Zoom is Rinsola Abiola. She's a Senior Special Assistant to the President on Citizenship and Leadership. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. Thank you very much for having me.
All right. The National Youth Conference that is coming up, Nigerians have lots of questions, but what should we expect from it?
So essentially, the Confab is a platform that has been set up to harness youth perspectives on nation building and national development. We want Nigerians to expect a very thorough consultation process. We understand that the youth demographic is not monolithic, and as such, we want to be able to engage the different subsets of young Nigerians and have their inputs on national development, on administration, on recommendations, on the kind of policies that they think they need to enable them fully develop their potential. So the youth conference essentially is the first of its kind that is focused on young people specifically, and we want to ensure that we hear from Nigerians from different strata of society and from everywhere in the country to ensure that Nigerian youth's perspectives are very well represented and that they go on to influence policies and decisions of government.
All right, so what's the selection process like? I'm glad you spoke about Nigerians being represented, Nigerian youths being represented appropriately, and voices being heard across. So what's the selection process like to have representatives from the grassroots that are really, really speaking the minds of the people?
So presently, today we're supposed to hold the inaugural meeting of the Confab Planning Committee. On Monday, we were inaugurated by Mr. President. So there are certain specifics that I cannot speak to at this time because I wouldn't want to preempt the committee, as what the committee is meant to do is then define all of the modalities for all of the engagements that the Confab will entail. However, what we do know, because we've also had 5 months, especially within the ministry, to consult amongst ourselves and other young people, especially in civil society and outside of the political space, on what we all think the Confab should look like. And what we have now that we're working with, that we then intend to develop on during today's inaugural meeting, already has components talking about grassroots consultation and then zonal town hall meetings as well, to ensure that we're able to get the perspectives of our young people at the zonal level too. And then the final conference in Abuja, which is where all the recommendations maybe will be put together, and then we'll have policy labs on specific issues. So it's not just going to be an engagement happening at the central, because we understand that there's a need for thorough grassroots consultation. And I can assure you, however, that the moment the modalities for all of these different components have been clearly defined by the committee, there'll be further communication from the committee on how exactly we intend to proceed, with specific dates for each of the engagements that have already been highlighted.
All right, grassroots representation is indeed very important. We had a phone-in segment where a lot of Nigerians asked questions on grassroots representation and for people that actually hold the voice of the people to come out and speak. But at the end of the day, what is expected from the youth that will participate? What do you expect to see and hear from the youth that will be participating in the Confab?
So as Mr. President said during the inauguration of the committee, he said, look me in the face and tell me, what you think we need to do. So we want very forthright feedback from our young people. We want very direct recommendations on what they want to see, what they think needs to be done differently, what steps they think we need to take as an administration to better represent them and to better safeguard their interests. So we want our young people to give us detailed feedback regarding the changes that they want to see, whether it's political administration and leadership, whether it's in climate and energy security, whether it's about social cohesion and security, whether it's about digital transformation and technology. Like, let us know what your thoughts are on these broad issues. And if you think there's anything else that we've left out, we all have the right to speak, and this is a country that we want to work for every single young person, irrespective of whether you're in the formal sector or the informal sector. And that's why we're working really hard to ensure that we have a very thorough process put together. We're also expecting feedback from our young people who maybe do not want to participate in physical engagements. There's going to be a virtual consultation process as well, which would also enable young Nigerians in the diaspora to be able to participate, and then we'll be able to receive memoranda from young people as well through the website of the Ministry for Youth Development. So these are all plans that are being put in place to ensure that, yes, in addition to the grassroots and zonal and Abuja engagements for the Confab, we're also able to reach our young people who cannot participate in any of those physical engagements, and that they are also able to make their voices heard and make recommendations while the Confab is on.
Are these other channels going to be available even after the Confab to ensure continuous feedback from young people?
So as of this moment, what we're working on doing is to ensure that there is a committee still set up after the Confab has been concluded to ensure that we're able to track the progress made from recommendations that we get. Because it's one thing to have a conference and then get feedback from all of the young people that we want to consult, and it is yet another to ensure that the actionable recommendations that we make are actually influencing the process of governance. As Mr. President said during his address at the inauguration of the committee, recommendations that will positively impact national development, he has pledged to implement them. So there also has to be a process that will ensure that implementation is done, that can track progress, and also now give communication subsequently to our young people on, okay, we had a confab, we reached this resolution, this has been achieved, this is in progress. Maybe at the end of the day, we might need to influence some bills. There are lots of processes when it comes to policy drafting and policy shaping. So whatever the process would entail at that point, there will definitely be sustained communication to our youth and to the citizens generally on steps that are being taken to ensure that the recommendations made through the confab are being implemented. Regarding feedback, I would say that this is an administration that has always been able to take feedback. We listen to our people, most of the young people. The fact that we have the Ministry of Youth standing on its own, and that we have a youthful minister in every sense of the word, superintending over the affairs of that ministry, is proof of the fact that this administration listens to feedback from young people, because it's one of the things that young people clamored for. So the confab itself has to have a very clear date for wrapping up all the activities related to it. But for subsequent feedback on anything at all from young people, that is something that we are currently receiving and will always be able to receive at the government level.
Okay, I'm glad you touched on implementation. This is not the first confab for youth that has been held. We've had, during the Goodluck administration.
For youth, it is the first.
How is this different from the previous youth confab that has been held? And I want you to throw more light on implementation. What time frame should Nigerians expect an implementation to start taking place?
So I would say that for youth, I would want to correct that again. This is the very first national youth confab that we're having by government. There have been lots of youth conferences. I'm from a background of youth mobilization and youth development as well. So there have been lots of youth conferences, but this is the first time that we're having the government actually say we're holding a confab specifically for youth people, for young people, and to address youth concerns. So it's the first of its kind. We've had conferences in the past, but not specifically for young people from the government. Then regarding implementation, as I said earlier, it depends on the kind of recommendations that are put forward eventually. If, for instance, you have one recommendation that only requires an executive order, you can expect something like that to be implemented pretty quickly. If you have another recommendation that would require, say, legislative action, and then you have to maybe amend the constitution or sponsor an executive bill, these are processes that are subject to how long other processes, like say in the legislature. So I personally, as an aide of Mr. President, cannot say this is how long it has to take if you're going to pass an executive bill or if we're going to sponsor a bill, regarding a particular recommendation. And that's why the subcommittee that will track implementation is going to keep at that particular assignment until we've gotten, to the level where perhaps all the recommendations that we made have been actioned. So I cannot give a specific time frame for when recommendations will go. It depends on what implementing those recommendations would entail.
Would the youth be involved in following up the implementation process for the sake of monitoring and evaluation?
But of course, if there's a subcommittee that remains dedicated to following the process, everything hinges on proper communication, right? We could be working and doing things for young people, but if we're not communicating it means they're not aware. So if there's going to be a subcommittee that will follow up on implementation after we're done with the conference itself, then I believe it goes without saying that that committee would also have to provide periodic updates on, okay, where are we with this recommendation and where are we with that recommendation, and the progress updates on each of them. That would also have to be communicated periodically.
So what are the plans for inclusivity, especially for youth in rural areas who have little or no access to digital services or the internet, or even aware of what is going on, and for people with disabilities? What plans are there in place to include them in this youth conference?
So I would say that firstly, the committee is made up of young people from every, from the length and breadth of this country, young people from within the political system or government, as the case may be, outside of it, civil society, serving in different capacities in their respective states, young people who are themselves very active in grassroots mobilization. And as I mentioned earlier, we understand that Nigeria's youth population is not monolithic. We're not all the same. We don't all have the same priorities or issues, or we don't all have the same level of access. And as such, it's one of the reasons why we're also very particular about designing a proper grassroots engagement framework that would allow us to properly engage our young people at the grassroots, especially in the informal sector as well, in order to ensure that the outcome of the confab and whatever recommendations are put forward properly cater to their needs and that their views are well represented. So as I said, the inaugural meeting is scheduled to hold this morning by 10 a.m. Definitely roles will be assigned, responsibilities will be assigned, and there will be further updates on how exactly we're proceeding, on when exactly certain engagements will be held. But rest assured, to all the young people who are listening, we are very committed to ensuring that the voices of young people are heard loud and clear, and that all the different subsets of the youth population are properly involved and well consulted during the confab.
Thank you. I love the fact that you touched on the informal sector, and we know lots of young people are hugely and massively involved in the informal sector, from owning their personal private businesses to entrepreneurship. So how are they going to be fully involved, even when it comes to benefiting from the implementation of, implementation of whatever is going to be raised there, whatever policies and complaints are going to be raised in the conference? How are the private sector, people in the informal sector, going to be fully involved, benefiting from this moving on?
So I would say, again, the inaugural committee is yet to hold, and I really wouldn't want to preempt the committee. But from my experience with youth mobilization and grassroots consultations, I know that within the informal sector, they operate around groups. So if you have young people belonging to different professions or different artisanal groups, they have groups that they operate through. And, our work will be to ensure that all the relevant are properly represented at all the grassroots focused engagements that we have. In addition to that, we are also working to ensure that there's adequate publicity or engagement during the confab. So whenever it is that we decide we're engaging somewhere or whatever form it will take, there has to be proper communication so that our young people are aware. And, again, I don't want to preempt the committee, but I actually see a lot of work being done to also have zonal, consultations. We've already said that it's part of what we intend to do, and grassroots engagement. So these are factors that we've taken into consideration. I'm not be able to give you specifics now because I don't think I should be speaking for a committee before the inaugural meeting has been held. But please rest assured that after the modalities have been clearly defined, there will be further communication from the committee regarding how we choose to proceed.
So have there been any key performance indicators set to record the outcome and the success of the conference?
I did mention earlier about the implementation and the fact that we're going to carry on with the work of the committee and track implementation after. So for me, I would say a major KPI for the confab is whether or not outcomes of that confab are acted upon. So that for me, I would say is the most crucial metric by which to assess the work of the committee and whether or not the confab has been successful. So that we have already made arrangements for. I guess Nigerians could also consider by the time the engagements start to hold, we would also be very happy to receive feedback when we begin to publicize the engagements and communicate dates and all of that. If there's any group at all that feels left out, it would be good, for them to also give feedback. So the feedback is going to be a continuous process that would also allow us to know if there's anything that we've done or any decision that has been made that perhaps needs to be reviewed. So it's an ongoing process. We're still designing. We have an idea of the broad concept and what we intend to do, but we're also still designing. And I keep saying it, I'm sorry if it sounds like I'm being repetitive, but once we're done with today's inaugural meeting, there will be more specifics that we'll then be able to share with you, God willing.
Okay, so let's talk about, the mistrust and distrust young people have in the government. So what are the plans to build trust for young people, given, the past of unfulfilled promises and how previous administration have really not put the youth first? What are the plans to make the youth trust this and that this would come out differently?
So I would say that this administration has proven itself to be one that is youth-focused and youth-friendly. In the very first instance, we have a Ministry for Youth Development separated from the Ministry of Sports so that we can focus squarely on issues. We have a Minister for Youth Development who is one of us, who belongs to the youth demography. We have other government officials working on youth issues who belong to the youth demography as well. This shows that the President is actually very committed to ensuring that it is young people who occupy the offices that are geared at protecting and promoting youth interest. And that is work that we have all been doing. Furthermore, if you look at the president himself, he's somebody who has always supported and encouraged young people and empowered young people right from when he was governor of Lagos State, right up until this moment. We've also had initiatives by this government. A good example is the Student Loan Fund, which is now helping to bridge the gap in access to higher education for our young people. And we know that that directly impacts earning power. It helps with, in the fight against poverty. And the fact that the loans are even non-interest based means that this is a government that cares about inclusion and, ensuring that all young people are able to benefit from government policies that are aimed at supporting young people. We also have a number of initiatives across MDAs that are youth focused. Someone said something earlier today about the Ministry of Youth Development. And the point I was going to counter with is that if you look into the budgets of different ministries, you will find that quite a number of projects there are youth-focused projects, youth empowerment, youth training, youth skill acquisition, youth development. So we find that youth development is a major focus area for quite a lot of ministries. So this is an administration that has put in the work to support young people, that is working really hard to prioritize young people, and to also ensure that matters affecting young people are given adequate attention and support. So I would say the confab as well is part of efforts for young people to know that their voices are valued, their perspectives are something that the president wants to listen to, and that they have a role to play in national development, in governing this country. And Mr. President truly cares about young people. Otherwise, there really would not be a need for it. If a confab was not announced, nobody would complain, seeing as it was not something we promised during the election. But this was something that he chose to do of his own volition, and he's now working to ensure that we deliver on it and that we consult as widely and as far as we possibly can to ensure that all youth perspectives are captured. So I understand the apathy from young people. I understand that we haven't always been satisfied with government. I also joined politics because I was not satisfied with how government was being run, all those years ago. So I understand coming from that background as well. And I would just want them to give us the benefits of doubt, this one time, and participate in the confab and let us actually come up with a document and outcomes that properly reflect the views and the perspectives of the generality of the young people of this country.
And I believe one way to go about that is transparency. How transparent is every process of this confab going to be? How available are information going to be to the average Nigerian, down to the rural area, down to the man who is hawking, the young boy who is hawking on the streets. How transparent and accessible is every details, from the selection process of those who would speak at the grassroots level to the involvement and implementation? What plans are they to make sure that this is transparent? Like you said, you were once dissatisfied with governance, that was why you came in, and you clearly understand the importance of transparency. So what plans are they to make sure this process is transparent and glaring for everyone to have access to?
So I would say, again, what we intend to do, part of what we intend to do at today's inaugural meeting is to split up the main committee into subcommittees that will handle the different aspects of planning. And one of the very key committees, I believe, is communication. So again, I'm speaking as a member of the committee who also happens to be an official of government. But again, I'm terribly sorry, but I would not want to preempt the committee itself. However, I can assure you that we're committed as a ministry and as a government to ensuring that young people are properly informed and updated about the activities of a committee. I would also, however, like to plead with our young people, because the challenge that I've noticed that we tend to have is that even when government agencies put in a lot of effort into promoting their initiatives, their programs and activities, you find that a lot of young people still complain about not being aware. So if we also as young people could be a bit more proactive about getting beneficial information, it would really help. When issues to do with governance are being discussed, or issues to do with government, it's not a boring topic that young people have nothing to do with. It concerns all of us. So as young people, I think we should also be proactive in seeking out information that is useful to us. The Ministry of Youth is online. All of who are working in the ministry have very active social media accounts. We have taken deliberate steps to also engage beyond our own immediate audience, working with influencers. Like what we're doing now, this invitation came in yesterday, pretty late, but I accepted it because I understand the importance of public engagement. I'm coming from another one as well. We have our inaugural meeting by 10 a.m., but I'm still here attending to this because it is important. So we understand the importance of engagement, but we also really want our young people to also understand the importance of actually listening to what government is doing, following up on what government is doing, engaging the process. I'm almost always on Twitter. Whenever I'm not occupied, I'm on Twitter. Questions come, I answer. There are so many of us on social, especially those assigned to the Ministry of Youth Development. The Ministry of Youth Development also now has active social media accounts. There's a website. So please engage these systems too, and please get your points across, share your feedback, share your ideas. Governance, it concerns all of us. And if we're in here working and we're pushing for youth voices to be heard, it's very important that young people as well don't leave us to do the bulk of the work. We need the support from other young people who are not within the political system, because what we are here to do ultimately is to safeguard and protect everyone's interests. So I'm pleading with our young people as well. Follow the system, engage the system. We are here for you. We are here because of you, and we are here to listen to you.
Thank you very much for that call. And I also want to ask a final question. You've made mention of Twitter and social media engagement. We also have youth who don't have access to the internet or Twitter or social media. And we also have those who do not understand English language. Are there plans, from both the Ministry of Youth, even from you, from the, in the process to make sure that this information is being passed to every single Nigerian, down to the ones in villages, through various means?
So what I have done, especially through my office, whatever we actually do engage very thoroughly to ensure that, one, we're not communicated to a very tiny segment. We're not just communicating to a very tiny segment of young people, and that we've had state level engagements where we actually travel down to states to engage with young people, and that's been happening across the board, with offices in the youth ministry as well. So as I said earlier, we understand very clearly that the youth demographic is not one, it's not monolithic. We have young people in the informal sector, formal sector, different levels of educational attainment, and we understand the need to communicate clearly to all the different strata of Nigeria's youth demographic. So I'm very confident that the communication strategy adopted eventually by the committee is one that will take all of these key characteristics and unique features into consideration and ensure that we're reaching our young people and that we're able to get feedback, actionable, meaningful feedback from our young people, irrespective of the communication barriers that might exist or, their level of education, whatever it is. As a young person, as long as you're a young Nigerian, your views are important, your voice needs to be heard, and we are here essentially to listen to you.
Thank you very much. Well, I would say this before I let you go. we're definitely going to be reaching out to you again in regards to this. We opened up the phone lines on these youth conference, and Nigerians had lots of questions, young and older, like majority of them doubting the process and the transparency of the process. I believe communicating on such platforms like these, where we know we have a lot of grassroots engagement, would also give an opportunity to educate Nigerians and know what they stand to benefit from getting involved in governance. So definitely we'll reach out to you. We're definitely going to reach out to you again. So we would have another detailed conversation like this, not just on the youth confab, but from things that are being put in place that the youth could benefit from in the long run. But thank you so much for joining us today. We do appreciate your presence.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
All right, if you're just joining us, that was Rinsola Abiola. She's a Senior Special Assistant to the President on Citizenship and Leadership. And she was sharing an insight on the National Youth Conference where a committee was just inaugurated, for that. Well, I hope you've been able to pick one or two from that conversation. We had this a few days ago where lots of questions were being asked. Unfortunately, she couldn't respond to some of them because of the meeting that will be held today. So we hope details from that meeting will be put out there for Nigerians to see and know what exactly is happening. Like I said, transparency is very important to Nigerians. Well, we hope you've been able to pick something from that conversation. We'll be going on a quick break, and when we get back, we'll be looking at stories that made it to the front page of our dailies. Do stay.